さな島沖縄に日本全国にある軍事基地の 74% が沖縄に集中しているという事実であります。
You see how tiny Okinawa's land is, because in that small rectangular part is Okinawa, which is about 0.6% of Japanese entire Japan's landmass, whereas this tiny area is holding 74% of the entire U.S. Armed Forces bases in Japan. It is very disproportionate and unfairly concentrated in Okinawa. Bases. For example, there are a number of aircraft crashed, and there was a rape incidents of local young girls by U.S. Navy, U.S. Armed Forces personnel. There were mountain fires caused by the drills in the mountain, and also traffic accidents by those personnel, and so forth. So we've been going through numbers of this type of accidents for the last 68 years. So having this type of background, what this new construction of the base facility means to us is another additional more than 100 years of suffering. So we've been suffering last 68 years, now we're talking about another, on top of these last 68 years, another 100 years of negative heritage to our new generations to come, to our children, to our grandchildren, and so on. Recently there was a public poll, and the result was 74% of Okinawa residents are against the construction of a new base facility. Well, please take a look at this left side picture. This is the explosion, the crowd-formed explosion of waste building. So they're trying to, what they've been doing here is explode unnecessary and kind of out of use weapons. And this is only 300 meters away from residential area. So this type of explosive noise, and also, how do you say, the vibration through the ground, causing the cracks in the house and the roads and the facilities. So this is the daily life of, in our city. So this is already our daily life. And once the base is built in our city, we are told that they're going to practice over 200,000 times of takeoffs and landings practice of Osprey and so the big noisy type of helicopters. So you can say that for not only for the residents of this area, but also for the old marine life in the beautiful Ora Bay, this new plan means to our the dead end of our life.
もう存在していたために自分のふるさとに帰れなくなったという人たちが多くいました。
Previously, my interpretation, I said for 7 years, but actually 2 years. So 1947, those who were kept in a concentration camp was told that they can go back to their local original home. But actually, when they went back to their hometown, their lands were taken. What they saw was the entire area was surrounded by the how do you say, the wire fenced. The entire area was wire fenced, and the place was kind of flattened by the bulldozer. So their home was gone. So there's no way they was able to go back to their original home. So they decided to live nearby, surrounding area of the bases.
配置換えになりました。
Toward the end of 1940s, U.S. Marine Corps that used to be stationed in Okinawa went back to the U.S. However, when the Korean peninsula became very, critical situation, the Marine Corps came back to Japan. Actually, in those days, they didn't come back to Okinawa, but they scattered different bases in mainland Japan. The local resident came up with a big anti-base movement. There's a very extreme example of one lady who claimed who clung herself to the how do you say, to the cannon, so that they cannot use the cannon. So this type of very strong opposition movement happened in mainland Japan.
が説明されています。
Therefore, in 1956, those U.S. Marine Corps camps scattered in Japan were consolidated and came back to Okinawa. We described it with the expression the bayonets and bulldozers. What happened was they flattened our agricultural field into a new base, expansion of additional base. So again, although the war was over, we were back to the wartime lifestyle again.
Many of us are aware that this is not unique, that there is a very similar resistance to a new base construction project in Jeju Island, South Korea, that the Philippines, which told U.S. troops to get out in 1991, now has U.S. troops going back in. The United States Marine Corps, for which this base is going to be built if it's not stopped in Okinawa, their advertisements say the few, the proud, the Marines. Well, they're not few, they're swarming Okinawa. These should be the many, the disillusioned, the oblivious, the unwelcome, the unwanted, the Marines. When you watch sporting events in this country, every once in a while the announcer will thank U.S. servicemen and women, whatever the service may be, for watching in 175 nations. There are only about 196 nations on Earth. Some of them just have CIA, some of them just have drones buzzing constantly in the skies, but 175 have US troops. So Japan and Okinawa are not unique. They are the norm at this point. The US military claims to manage global property of over 555,000 facilities at over 5,000 sites, covering more than 28 million acres. So the United States military is occupying a large portion of the globe. It's over half of the spending that our Congress in this town decides on every year. It's our biggest consumer of petroleum, biggest destroyer of the natural environment at home as well as abroad. This is the problem. It's not a question of this location or some other location. Build this base or build a different base or a smaller base or a better base or a more sleek or efficient base. The problem is the military-industrial complex and the idea that it should continue. Is that the opposition is going to continue, and it's growing in Vicenza. There have been victories in places like the Philippines, in places like Puerto Rico where the Navy was told finally to get out of Vieques, in places like Ecuador, where the president of Ecuador said to the US government, and I highly recommend this approach to our guests today, you can have a base in Ecuador if I can have a base in Miami, Florida. We need Ambassador Caroline Kennedy, who has met with and listened to our guests, to speak up and act. I have a little baby at home, and I've started reading him a collection of poetry edited by Caroline Kennedy, and there's nothing in there about go along with the madness of militarism. It's all I took the road less traveled. Well, she needs to pay attention to these words of wisdom and act on them.
Mayor Tadatoshi Akiba of Hiroshima held up the remains of a pair of melted eyeglasses and explained that it was through these glasses that an old grandmother in Hiroshima saw her last view of the world. These glasses were an apt symbol of the need for a clear vision of a future without nuclear weapons, 2020 vision. The Mayors for Peace vision of a future without nuclear weapons calls for immediate and substantive negotiations towards a universal nuclear weapons convention and physical destruction of all nuclear weapons by 2020. In 2010, UN Secretary General Ban Ki-moon, speaking in Hiroshima, called the Mayors for Peace 2020 vision, quote, the perfect vision. In 2005, a Mayors for Peace delegation, in cooperation with non-governmental organizations, and A-bomb survivors led the biggest anti-nuclear march in New York City since 1982, from the UN to a rally in Central Park. An estimated 40,000 people participated under the banner, "No nukes, no wars, end the war in Iraq, abolish all nuclear weapons." In 2006, Mayors for Peace launched phase 2 of its 2020 Vision campaign, including the Good Faith Challenge, challenging governments to live up to their obligations, and also the Cities Are Not Targets project. As Mayor Akiba explained, when one contemplates nuclear weapons, one contemplates the fate of cities and civilization itself. Cities, citizens, civilian, and civilization all derive from the same Latin root. Cities were the cradle of every civilization, and this is just as true today. For their many problems, modern cities are the repositories of everything that makes civilization possible. They are where the concept of law first took root, and where the highest courts of law are found today everywhere in the world. Indeed, it was legal institutions that made cities possible. As the cities led the world in economy, art, education, and many other worthy fields, the cities in the 21st century are to lead the world in most of these areas. As a matter of fact, we've come to the conclusion that the 21st century is one of cities. While we've been raised to look to our national governments to provide security and prosperity, perhaps it is time to look a little deeper. Cities need to step forward to support international efforts, especially when the nation state is failing to deliver. Through our Cities Are Not Targets project, cities across the world will break out of the Cold War spell and mutiny against the tyranny of nuclear madness. We will no longer be the docile hostages to such inhumane and illegal threats. Good faith is an essential part of any functioning society. A mayor is entrusted with the faith and fate of the citizens. It is not enough for the mayor not to break the law. The mayor must act in good faith at all times, even when tempted by power and wealth to do otherwise. Our proximity as mayors to our citizens makes mayors honest, and therefore makes it easier to carry out their obligations of good faith. And certainly, Nago City Mayor Inamine exemplifies this kind of mayor, and we all thank you and honor you for that.